but that doesn't mean that oftentimes women don't need to worry about if they're alone in a parking lot, what could happen. And so those things have probably been magnified for me. And so like, my friends will be on dating websites and stuff, and I'm like, and I'll say something like, oh my God, self-preservation. Like, you guys need to be in a public location. Like, what are you talking about? And they're like, on it, it's like not a big deal. It's like, no, I see a lot of crazies. I know crazies exist. Trust me. Like, and so I see myself in that regard very like if I meet people, I'm always like, I'll be very cautious and on the guard. I'm very guarded at the beginning, because of what I see here.
Okay, that's very understandable. What is your workload like?
Right now, I'm playing two attorneys roles, so it's really large. But generally speaking, it varies with every department. So, and it varies with every attorney here. So Allison, who's our trafficking attorney, maybe has 12 cases. As a family law attorney, I had gone up to 45 cases at one point. And Mike, as the immigration attorney, had up to 200 open cases. So, and that doesn't mean they were all actively worked on, but there were 200 open cases that could potentially have something come in. I think maybe 45 of them were actively being worked on, and the other 155 were probably pending. But that's kind. It varies per person here. Case management's a little different. There's more case managers, and the longevity of a case manager's case is way smaller than the longevity of our cases. So their cases maybe last 3 months max. Our cases an immigration file I could submit today, and my client won't get a result for that immigration case maybe until 7 or 8 years from now. So that case is going to be on my desk for 8 years. So, it really just varies on how many cases we have because of those kinds of factors. They vary. Like I said, there's no one definite answer about workload. We try to keep it at 20 family law cases, but like I said, I got to 45 once just because of emergencies and staff changes and so forth.
Okay. What type of education do you need to work in this field?
So as an attorney, obviously you need your law degree. But for case managers, a lot of them have bachelors, some of them have masters. For the counselors here, you have to be a licensed professional counselor or a licensed social worker. You can be an intern in one of those fields as well, so you can be getting your master's in interning here. But for a lot of the professional fields, so counseling and an attorney, you have to have those professional degrees, and you have to have those hours that allow you to work here. So then in terms of, that's the education, but then there's training, and that's one thing that we make sure that every person gets here is domestic violence training and trauma center training and trauma focused training, and then culturally competent training. So people are like, well, we're culturally competent, and I'm like, you might be culturally competent, but you're not trauma centered or trauma focused. So for example, there's a shelter that doesn't specifically work. They don't deny people that aren't Muslim there, but they house a lot of Muslim women there, and most of the case managers are Muslim and stuff. So they're very culturally competent in working with Middle Eastern populations and Muslim populations, but they're not necessarily trauma centered or trauma focused. And I say that, or that's the experience I get. So for example, one of our clients ended up staying at the shelter for almost 2 years, and that to me and to most people in this field would think is very enabling of not becoming a survivor, not becoming empowered, right? Because the whole point of shelters they're supposed to be transitional in nature, so that you can find a place to live. And if you're allowing someone to stay for 2 years, you're not encouraging them to find a new place to live. You're not encouraging them to try to move on with what's happened to them to find a new and better life. And it's not easy by no means. By no means am I saying that it is. But what I'm trying to say is the average traditional housing shelter time should be 6 months. And when I have a client that's in a shelter for 2 years, that's way past the average, and that's the national average, right? 6 months. So some places are shorter, some places are longer, but 2 years is way an outlier, right? And so I was going somewhere with this, and then I completely stopped. Can you remind me of the question so that I know?
Okay, so the question was, what kind of education do you need to work in this field?
Oh yeah, and I was going with trauma centered. So like they're culturally competent in that they were able to provide our culturally competent services, but they weren't trauma centered in that they couldn't realize someone who's gone through trauma needs to be empowered and not just coddled and cared for. Does that make sense?
Yes,
and so,
it completely makes
so
sense.
there's several levels of training, not just professional degrees you need in order to provide the services that we provide.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a great answer. What programs have you noticed have been the most effective? And then I'll ask you the opposite. Which ones have been the least?
What do you mean by programs?
Like services you, I guess like services that you offer, such as programs for the
Survivors?
yes, for the survivors.
So it's funny, there's a study in 2003 by Colgate Universities, or economists at Colgate University. So we're talking about, these are economists, right? These aren't legal providers, they're not social service providers. And these economists did this great study, which actually led to legal aid funding from the federal government. And the study showed that outside of all the services a survivor or a victim can get, legal services are the determinative factor for a survivor to stay out of an abusive relationship. And so I'm a little biased because I'm an attorney here. And I don't think there's actually one thing, though, that's the best service here. I think that Mosaic as a whole, so the fact that they can get legal services is actually a great thing. But I think that study showed that when they got legal services, they actually stayed out of an abusive relationship. However, the client was getting all these other services, kind of the way Mosaic has, to get legal services. I can't say if a client just gets legal services and doesn't get any of that, would they stay out of a relationship. I think that there's no one good thing about Mosaic. I think that because Mosaic, unlike most other agencies, offers complete and wraparound services, to survivors, that it makes it easier for the survivor to thrive. I can't say there's one particular department because sometimes clients don't make it through the legal department and they only get those services and they end up thriving, right? Okay. So I can't say there's one program here that is the best or the most positive program, because a client kind of needs all of the services they're getting here to be able to thrive and survive. Legal services are really necessary for the cases if there's severe abuse, when there's a child or children that are being threatened to taken away, or there's real lethality threats towards the survivor. So I like I said, I can't say there's one program here that's the best. And on the flip side, to answer your question, I actually don't think there's a program here that is the least beneficial. Because, like I said, most survivors have to go through different paths to become a survivor. And sometimes they choose case management and counseling, and then a year later they choose legal. And sometimes they'll choose legal, say, no, I'm only here to get legal services, and then end up getting case management and counseling services well after that. And no one can get one of those services and not another, because the reality is if you are a survivor of domestic violence, you need mental health services, because you need that counseling to really understand what happened and why you stayed for so long and why leaving was the right thing for you to do, and to empower you to become a survivor. And then to get those services, you need a case manager to help you find housing, to stay afloat, help you get food stamps so that you can feed your children, to help you get Medicaid for your children so they can actually get services for health. All of that, right? So I don't think there's any one program here that would be the least beneficial. I think that all of them kind of interplay, so it's really hard to say one's better and one's worse.
That's a great answer. Do you stay in touch with victims after the trial?
Yes and no. We do eventually. So a trial can happen and you can get a final order from the judge. And that case still stays on your desk for maybe several months after that. So for me, I had a trial last April, got the final order in May signed by the judge, and then that case stayed on my desk until September because the order stated that I needed the client to, the client and the husband needed to sell the house. And you know, there are stipulations that the court put on the selling of the house, and so I had to make sure that my client was following all those stipulations until the house was sold. And so it's so I did, keep in touch with her until sometimes clients will reach out after to get more clarification on some of the orders. But oftentimes, once the client's case is finished from this office, they may keep in touch themselves, just trying to say like I'm good, and sometimes I'll follow up and just to make sure and check in and see if they're good. But once a client's case is closed here, it's closed, and so unless the client chooses to reach out for whatever reason, or if circumstances have changed for the client, we may not have contact with the client again.
Okay. Do you see victims return for help again?
Yeah, I've had plenty of cases where clients have started the process with me, have stopped the process, and then restarted the process with me. Case managers see it all the time. The client that I told you about who ended up having that second child with the abuser, she apparently, before I even knew this, before I even started her case, she had been her case manager's client on and off for 4 years. So she had left, come back, left, and come back. And like I said, victims of domestic violence will, on average, leave the abuser 7 times before they finally leave. So, in those 7 times, they will seek services and stop seeking services and then re-seek services. So we do see clients come back many times over.
Okay. Do you see victims come back as, well, you said as, come back for help as repeat victims? Have you seen victims actually been the aggressor or offender?
I have not in my field yet. It's questionable in one of my cases whether the victim was the abuser as well, and then chosen to be seeking services to kind of stop the actual victim from getting services from us. But I haven't seen that really. Case managers have seen that. Case managers can't ask whether they believe the abuse is real or not. The case managers have to take the victim as a victim. If they've identified themselves as a victim of domestic violence, the case manager has to do the work for them. I don't, so I have, and I get to do a legal consultation, and I can assess their credibility in a legal consultation because my consultation's in depth and I ask questions about the abuse. And so I can kind of pick up whether or not I can kind of judge their credibility, right? I've never seen it where I've literally been sitting there being like, they're the abuser. I've never felt that way. I've felt that both people may have been at fault a couple sometimes, but I've never felt that my personal client was the abuser. I have had friends in other nonprofits say that the abuser has reached out to them, but I've never had it where I've been fortunate that none of my clients have been that way. That just case managers have had that happen though, where the abuser has sought services, and the victim has also sought services, and so their ability to assess the difference is different than my ability to assess the difference, and their allowance on what they can and can't ask is different under federal funding than what I can and can't ask under federal funding.
Okay. Do most victims come from similar backgrounds or environments?
Yes and no. We actually have clients from all across the globe. So we have a lot of our clients are from like Mexico, Central and Latin America, basically. And even South America, but we have several Middle Eastern clients. We have we have several European clients. So everyone's kind of different. The one thing about domestic violence, it cuts across all genders, it cuts across all races, it cuts across all socioeconomic classes. The one commonality not the one commonality, but the larger commonality because of who Mosaic serves specifically, is that we get a lot of limited English proficient clients. So 67% of the legal department alone, 67% of the legal department's clients are limited English proficient. That might be the only real commonality in terms of demographics. Obviously, the commonality is that they're all victims of domestic violence or survivors of abuse, but I wouldn't say there's commonalities in other ways, except that they all feel like they lack power, and so you're trying to empower them, and they all feel like they need help in some capacity. But DV cuts across everything, so you can't. There's nothing that's different, but there's nothing that's the same at the same time. If that makes sense.
Yes. Have you ever had any victims who were then victimized by the people who were supposed to help them?
Um, Here I haven't seen that. Have I ever seen that? Yes. And I feel like since you're talking about Mosaic, I can't. I'm not going to go into the story, that story, but I've seen that before, but not at Mosaic.
Okay. Okay. And that was the final question.
Okay. I don't know if you want me to go into that.
You can go into that story. That's perfectly fine.
When I was a domestic violence advocate in London, we were helping someone who was trying to leave her abusive relationship with her partner, and had subsequently gotten a new partner, and that partner was coming to a lot of the meetings with us because she said, no, I want her here. So it felt like her new partner was helping her get out of this abusive relationship, and so forth. And really what that new partner was doing was trying to understand the services that were available for domestic violence survivors. So when she started victimizing our survivor again, so her new partner started victimizing her. Her new partner knew of all the resources that would have been available to her because she'd attended all of the meetings and had come to everything.
That's crazy.
And so the client was struggling to reach out to us because her partner knew who we were. Her partner knew kind of what the process was in trying to get our client to have left her original partner. And so I've seen it. And that's not the first time I've seen it, but I've been fortunate enough to not see it here.
Good. I noticed that you said you had to sit with an interpreter when you enter meetings and stuff like that. How many languages do you happen to speak?
I speak 3, so English, Urdu, and Hindi. I can pretty fluently understand Spanish. I can understand it quite well. I can't speak it that well. So we'll use an interpreter with me when they're Spanish-speaking clients, which we have a ton of. And Mosaic is pretty unique because Mosaic offers services in about 30 languages. So not only are we trauma-centered and trauma-focused, we are very culturally competent. And when a client comes in and they identify as a particular ethnicity or from a particular region, we're fortunate enough that we can often hook them up with a case manager that's particularly from that region and understands that region well and speaks the dialect. And so our clients feel like they can talk to someone in their mother tongue and really felt heard. So that's really beneficial for us. So by the time the client comes to legal, they've already gotten the empowerment from their case managers.
That was one of the things I liked when I called before. And I heard a voicemail, and it had it was
Sue Land's was in 3 languages. You probably talked to Sue Land because hers is in 3 languages. Cool. Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So I mean, we're fortunate that we have that that process available here.
Most definitely. Thank you so much for your time because you have been great.
No problem.